Hey there. Thanks so much for joining us again for this episode of Speaking of the Village. I am your host, Dawn Thompson, and we are short. My co host, Nicole, she is in the hospital with her little one. And so it's just you and me today, Jenna. I'm really excited because I love the fact that we're talking about modern birth prep is missing the point. And that's really what we're going to dive into today. And I'm sure we'll, splinter off in a bunch of different directions like we always do. But the thing I love about this podcast is that we don't want it super structured. We want it to just be a conversation between birth workers that can help our pregnant listeners just feel more informed and gather more information to make different decisions about their care process. Let's dive in. Jenna, please tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're located and what you do.
Great, thanks. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to have a convo. I'm sorry to miss Nicole and for such challenging circumstances. That's always hard to hear.
Yeah.
My name's Jenna Walenga. I am an empowered birth coach, and I really help women step into their power so that when they walk through the rite of passage and portal that's birth, they're ready and they feel confident and like they can really be who they're meant to be in that process and become who they're meant to become. Because as you know, like that's a transition into this next stage of life. And when we treat it as such and we show up for it, ready for it, then we find the results or who we become on the other side also shows the impact of that work. I'm located in Bellingham, Washington. We're right up in the northwest corner of the United States. And I really came to this work from a background, not just in my own journey to becoming a mother, but I was a prenatal and postpartum yoga teacher. And I started incorporating in my prenatal yoga classes this mindful piece, this mental prep, spiritual prep, really being with the body in a different way. And I saw a lot of positive impact from my clients and my students, and students would come back and be like, no one was talking about it like this, or this piece that we used to do really helped me. And so I wanted to reach more people and expand that work, because I think that those pieces that really come from a yogic background and a wellness background and a mindset background. I've been like a life coach in the past and a wellness coach. Those pieces weren't being talked about as much in the birth prep world. And I really wanted to bring them forth. And that's how I've come to where I am, where I've got I have an ebook, I have a birth course, and I am also working with groups getting ready for birth. So I'm really excited to share.
Well, the first thing I want to say is that what we know is that the majority of women and just pregnant families in general are not even taking childbirth prep at all. So let's just start with how that point first, because I think the last numbers were like 30%. Only 30% of first-time moms are actually taking any sort of childbirth education that's formal. And sometimes they're just taking they think, oh no, I took a class and it's like a 1-day class at the hospital,
Right.
which really is not a birth prep class. It is a how to be a good patient class.
Yeah, a hospital policy is one of
what the expectations of the hospital are. It is not preparing you for birth at all. And then the other thing is that many people now are just piecing together information. They're following social influencers, right? They are listening to podcasts, which, listen, that's a great start. But I think people really underestimate what kind of information and education and support, mental, emotional, that they need. So, I mean, let's just start there. Why do you think it's critically important?
Well, I think when we think about like just letting it be and showing up for birth just with whatever your general background is, then you're showing up with all the ideas that have been put into your head without your knowing. So these are like watching TV as a child and seeing that scene of that like crazy birth, and the mother is always so angry at everyone around her and like screaming. So you get that influence, and then you're getting who you find on social media. So maybe it's like the full other end of someone who's like, oh, you'll know what to do, your body will know what to do, and so you're just walking in with these subconscious programming, and a lot of that is just wildly inaccurate, right? So then
I can't even tell you how many people that I've interviewed with as a doula who think that labor starts with water breaking.
yeah,
That's just because that's all we've ever seen through sitcoms and movies. It's like,
even just the
and that
concept that it's an emergency.
Totally. And like, oh my God, then that's like all this chaos. And that's what people really believe.
Yeah.
And wildly inaccurate.
Wildly inaccurate. So then if you're talking about like our normal world of birth prep, you're at least getting some more realistic information. Even like the hospital policy training 101 birth prep, they're at least helping you understand, like, please don't come to the hospital the moment that you're feeling any contractions. Like, please stay home. Like,
Right.
we will send you home over and over. So you're at least getting a better picture of like what might be more realistic. But then, of course, through the lens of how the hospital would like you to behave, as you pointed out or stated. And so that's problematic. When we're letting our programming, when we're letting the things we don't even know we don't know run the show, we're not going to be ready for reality. And I think that that's true of like most of the things that we're experiencing in the world, right? Like, I remember driving a car for the first time. It was like, this is so different than what I thought it would be like.
Yeah.
And I like took a turn at like 25. And my mom was like, what the fuck? Because it was crazy. But I was like, I don't know what driving a car feels like. I don't know how this is supposed to go. And so we need more like of an understanding of what is going to unfold potentially so that we can actually prepare for it. And that's kind of, yeah, where we're starting. So getting more women and pregnant people to just acknowledge, like, I don't know. And so I want to prepare. And then the second piece of that is when we don't know and when we feel like, oh my God, this isn't what I expected, this isn't what I wanted, we hand the power over. We think like, okay, well, I don't know what to do, so you must know what to do. So tell me what to do. So we're looking at the people in the room, which might be a doula if we took that step, but it is often just going to be our providers. And so that is really like, depending on the provider that you have and the choices you've made in that process, like, you could be handing over all these very important choices that will impact you. They'll impact your birth experience. They'll impact your child. They'll impact your postpartum experience. And you're just saying, like, you make the decisions for me. Whatever you say goes. And that person might not know the best answers for you.
Right. But not only that is many people are surprised to find out that they may never even see their provider until the baby is literally coming out.
Yeah.
So they may never see them at any point during their labor. And then they also expect that the nurse is going to be hanging out,
Yeah.
which also isn't true in most cases. Sometimes the hospital's slow and the nurse has got nothing else to do. She might be in there, especially if you've found that you have a nurse that's kind of a doula at heart, and she loves all of that. And even some labor and delivery nurses have started taking doula training to help their clients that come in without a doula. But the reality is most of the time, it's just you and whoever you invited into that room.
Yeah.
And they are watching you on a monitor from outside. Like, it's just you guys. And that, I think, surprises a lot of people as well.
Yeah. And that feeling of like being out of your depths, right, creates a sense of panic. And we don't want to be in a panicked or fearful state when we're trying to like bring a baby into the world and labor in a way that is effective and a way that like leaves us feeling good. We don't want to be in like, I don't know what's going on, I'm panicking, who's going to help me, who's going to save me. And I think it's a challenge because culturally we do want that a lot in a lot of other places. We want to be told, what job should I get, where should I live, what should I do, what should I eat. We want to outsource these decisions. And when we can't, it creates almost like an alert in our body if we're not ready for that. Like, if we're not prepared to make the decision on our own and we're not prepared to like really feel what's happening in the moment, we really just want to outsource it. So the more prep we can do to avoid that, to know like, okay, I'm going to have to be with myself. I'm going to have to be making these hard decisions. I need to know ahead of time, like, what it might look like. What are my priorities? What are my values? What am I seeking? How do I want to feel? Yeah, so it's not light work, it's deep work.
It's personal responsibility.
Yeah.
And I've come back, if you've watched other episodes with me, I talk about this a lot because it really struck me. Caitlin was one of our guests from Be Her Village. And one of the things that she said was that with her second baby, she became a more active participant. Where the first time she was just in this mindset of like, everybody around me knows what to do. I'm just going to go with the flow and do whatever they say to do. She did not have a good positive birth experience and realized like, oh shit, this was on me. This should have been on me. So, one of the things, I mean, I feel like you take birth prep to another level And so let's dive into that a little bit, because one of the things that you say is that modern birth prep is missing the point of birth entirely. So you want
Okay,
to,
so yeah, to really go there, I think I want to say that I believe that birth is not just like this event that we need to go through to have a baby. Yeah, like it's not like, oh, okay, we're gonna, and that's the only point, right? I think that the point of that birth is the way that it is, that it's such a challenge, it's such a unique experience. I think it is perfectly and potentially like divinely designed to help birthing people and women rise to who they're meant to be. So to become not only the mother that they're meant to be, so the mother they might dream of being, who's like different than how they were parented. Maybe you want to be a calm and like present mother, or maybe you want to be like a fierce mother, ready to protect. And the who you will become or how you will become that version of yourself is through the challenge that is birth. I don't think it's an accident that it is such a challenge and such a calling to a higher way of being. I can liken it sometimes to the other rites of passions that we might think about, which are more like they're also outside of our culture, like vision quests, right? Where a young often boy might be like sent out into the wilderness on their own so that they can rise into becoming that man, because they have faced these challenges that no one can prepare them for, but they have to prepare themselves in strength of spirit. And so I believe that birth is intentionally designed to invite a rising, an inner rising, so that you can not just become the mother you want to be, but also the leader and the person that you want to be. So with that lens, I think focusing on just surviving birth, right? Like running away from how challenging it is. I believe in all choices and support all choices of women, but I think often like a choice to, let's talk about like an elective cesarean. So a choice to be like, I'm opting out as much as I can of the birth experience. Now, like, there are so many reasons people might choose that, and they're valid. And so if that's the journey someone's on, like, I respect and honor that. But I think if you're trying to approach life and approach birth from a more growth oriented, how can I become more of who I want to be? How can I rise up and expand in this lifetime? Then birth is a portal and an access point to that, a way that we can go through. So then we want to, instead of looking at how to survive it or get away from sensation or escape the pain of birth, instead to turn towards like, how can we grow through it? Which for me is inviting in not avoiding pain and pain management, which I actually think is a lot of what we see in normal modern birth prep. So even stepping beyond, well, hospital birth prep we'll talk about here is like, here's the medicines we can give you to help with pain. Here's how epidurals work to avoid the pain. Here's like all these A, B, and C, D steps we can take so that you feel less pain. And then we get into like maybe that home birth prep, where people are like, okay, well, we're going to use a TENS device to help you with pain. And we're going to use these different methodologies to help you with pain. And we're going to reduce the pain in this way, and this way, and this way. And that was what I received going into my first birth, was like, okay, here's all the ways I can keep going and I can breathe and I can reduce the pain that I'm feeling so that I can come out and survive, right? Like, and make it through. And then I experienced my own first birth and was sitting on a birth ball, or my I was very close to actually pushing, and my midwife was like, maybe you should sit on the birth ball. And I said, like, when I sit on the birth ball it hurts, so I don't want to do it. And she looked at me and she was like, well, the things that hurt are the things that are moving your baby down, so like maybe do it anyways. And I was like, no one had mentioned this, like no one had mentioned, until I was like basically about to push my baby out, like no one had said pain in birth actually is a sign that things are going in the direction you want them to go, and you should maybe try looking towards pain. And that fundamental shift, that instead of running away from pain, we should be inviting pain, turning towards pain, and preparing ourselves in the prep process to do that, to be like, I see the pain, the burning, the fire, the sensation, whatever word you want to use, as, I look into the fire. Like, I find that place where I can, instead of running when the pain comes, I can say, like, I have this, I can hold this, and I can go deeper into it.
yeah, it's so interesting that you say that, because of course I've coached that for, a couple decades now, of that exact thing of like, I'm always telling my clients, go towards that discomfort. You're not trying to get, because when you're trying to get away from it, you're actually causing more discomfort. And so I always say that you want to do everything that you can to lean into it in the biggest way possible and just embrace it and take it and like, and move your body with it even,
Mhm.
right? Like so that you're saying that just resonates with me for sure in the way that
Yeah.
I as well.
And if we think about these big reasons that births might go in a different direction than planned, so for example, like a stalled labor, and then either extra use of pitocin or eventually ending in cesarean because birth isn't happening fast enough, right? Like that's a common story. It's not happening fast enough. But like let's set that aside for now, like in its own issues, right? The birth's not happening in a certain timeline. But at the very least, like when we are avoiding the pain, we're not on like the fast track of birth. We're on the like slow down, we're on the rest and take it slow. When we want birth to go at a certain speed, that requires being like, here's the position that hurts, or here's the approach, like the way to go towards this that invites in the harder work of opening. That's where we see speed, right? That's where we see speed, not in the like, well, let's lessen the pain, let's relax, let's lay back. And I actually think there's a space for both. I teach a lot about learning to rest and learning to soften. And like I believe learning to sleep or nap during a labor is crucial towards avoiding exhaustion, especially if we're talking about a first birth or something that is
For
probably going
sure.
to be a long haul, right? Which is, there's nothing wrong with the birth taking a long time, but we do see exhaustion when people aren't knowing how to do both, aren't knowing how to go work hard when it's time to work hard and rest when it's time to rest and keep
Yes.
your body strong for longer.
That's the other thing I say all the time is like, this is the number one mistake. The number one mistake that first time parents make is they stay up all night that first night.
Yeah, they think it's
Sitting on the
coming. It's like
ball,
you might
trying to
get
get it
too nice.
going. I'm having contractions, right? They're doing all the things. And
Yeah,
instead, I say, go to sleep, go to sleep. If it wakes you up, fine,
wake up and then sleep. Yeah,
right?
wake up and
And
then
then
sleep.
you come out of it and you go back to sleep, but so
Yeah.
that you're getting a good night's rest. But most people with that first baby, they stay up all night long, timing the contractions, even if they're 7, 10 minutes apart. They're timing the contractions, they're doing all the things. And then you're right. The next day, they just now they haven't had a good night's sleep. And now the exhaustion is going to catch up with them pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And then now they're in super active labor and they can't,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. They can't rest. And that piece also of like knowing when to rest and knowing when to go is a major part of what I would call an empowered birth, because I think we over talk about, not over, I would say we talk about a lot the surrender, the like ride the waves, it's out of your control, let go, let go, let go. And yes, like you are going to have to surrender. I think one of the main messages of pregnancy and birth is like it's not in your control, and motherhood, right? Like we don't have control. You can't, as soon as that baby's out of you, you learn like I have no control over you. You do your own thing. And so yes, let go, surrender, learn to ride the waves, and do
And
not become a victim of your birth. You are not helpless. You have a sense of like you are birth in and of itself. Like your body is doing this. It is not an outside force coming and doing it to you. And so keeping in touch with like, is this the time to rest? And I can rest and I need a break, right? Like in early labor especially, but like getting in the bath and letting things calm down. I think in our modern culture there's this like fear of slowing labor, which comes from that hospital timeline story. But there's a fear of slowing labor, and yet knowing that you can, especially in early labor, which can be a long time, knowing that you can choose, like, I'm going to lay down, I'm going to rest, I'm going to get the hot water on my back and slow this, and not being afraid to like let birth kind of like give you a break for a moment and then come back when you feel ready. When you feel ready to like, I remember distinctly in both of my experiences, like lying in bed in the morning and knowing that as soon as I got out of bed and stood up, it was going to start kicking, and like saying like, okay, I'm going to drink a smoothie, I'm going to lay in bed with these contractions, and then I'm going to get up and I'm going to go to work, like, and do this thing. And I think that piece isn't talked about. We really emphasize the let go, and it's a both and. Let go, be ready to surf the waves. But a surfer doesn't just kind of like lay on their back and float in the water and hope that they surf. They like know when to paddle. They know when to chill and skip it. They're very much in control of like, here I am, the magic of the waves are crashing. I'm going to surf them, but I am not helpless. And birth is not passive. It is not a passive experience that you let happen to you. It is an energetic experience that you are the weaver of, like, in your own way. And so knowing that both are true, and learning how to find that, like, I'm riding, I can't control the intensity of this, but I can choose how I respond to it. I can choose when I'm wanting to dig in, when I'm wanting to slow down. It's almost like letting yourself become this magician, right? Who's like, there's this powerful energy and you are on this ride, and you have to be on this ride. You get to be on this ride, but you also get to, like, spin magic and weave energy in. But you can only do that from that place of believing in your own power and ability to be with all that.
So talk to me though about, like, you talk about nervous system regulation,
They do.
and like, are there things that, because what we're talking about is preparing
Yeah.
before birth happens, right? And so how does someone prepare, like what you're talking about? How do they prepare?
Yeah. Nervous system regulation is, I mean, it's kind of a buzz, I feel like, right now, but it's also because it's so important. And I don't know if you maybe have covered this in other podcasts, but we want to be in our parasympathetic response, which is our rest and digest state when giving birth. It makes sense. Our sympathetic response is that fight or flight that we hear so much about, the running from a tiger. And when we put the context of, like, delivering a baby in that, it's like, if you're running from a tiger, not a good time to have a baby. Your body is going to be like, okay, no, we're going to hold on. We're not going to do it. Got it. We're going to run. And the opposite is true. So we want to be in that space of, like, there's no tiger. Everything is safe. And then our body's like, okay, well, we can bring a baby. We can bring a baby into the world. Everything is safe. We're safe. Our body is not going to bring a baby into the world when everything is like, there's literally a tiger about to eat your baby. It's not going to happen. So our nervous system regulation on the baseline level is really about knowing how to teach our body to be feeling in that safe zone, feeling in that rest and digest, that parasympathetic response. The number one tool that I teach for this, and this is so valuable, not just during birth, which also I think all of your birth prep, this is like high level, but all of your birth prep should also be parenthood prep, because birth is just like one day and then you're a parent, right? And so nervous system regulation is going to help you that one day, and then it's going to help you be an actual mom, which requires so much grounding, so much I'm safe, so much teaching yourself to calm and stay present. And so the number one,
I am taking a deep breath, as just as you're saying it, you're making me take a deep breath, thinking about the moments I've had to, like,
yeah,
dealing with my kids, right? And just be
your
like,
capacity to stay calm has to stay so big. And you will, full disclosure, anyone who doesn't have kids, you will hit your capacity no matter, I don't care if you're like the perfect meditator, I don't care. You're going to hit your capacity and you're going to flip your lid. It's okay. We still
yes,
love you. You're still loved and you're doing great. But
yes.
having tools in your pocket is helpful. So the tool that I would teach and do teach is just so simple. When we're in our stress, our inhalation gets longer than our exhalation. This is so we can pump blood to our hands and legs to run. This is help to, like, oxygenate so we're ready to fight or to run. The way to tell your body that it's time to rest is to make your exhalation longer than your inhalation. It's such a simple breathing exercise, and many people have already seen it. It's similar to what some people call box breathing, but you're just going to make sure that your exhale is longer than your inhale. The simplest way to do that is to count your breath. There's no right number. You could do that right now. You can just, like, inhale and count how long it is. It's probably 3 or 4 or 5. And then exhale, and you'll just count how long that is. And for most of us, that's going to be about the same, like a 3 or 4 or 5. And to practice making that or turning on our parasympathetic response, you just start to bring that exhale longer. So you take your normal inhale to a count of 3 or 4, and then you exhale to a count of 5 or 6 or 7. Then you're just going to repeat that cycle. You don't have to overthink it. You don't have to practice, like, doing the right number of breaths or the right counting. You just let the exhale be longer. And as you do that, you'll notice the mind calms, the body relaxes, the muscles relax. So this tool, I gave you one nervous system tool, and that's probably all I have time for today. But, like, this is the tool that will carry you, honestly, through traffic jams, through fights with partners, through midnight wake ups, through losing your job. Like, there's so many times. And then, of course, through toddler tantrums and fighting siblings and overstimulation of sounds at dinner time. Right? Just like that ability to exhale long and smooth and steady, we'll start to settle. It's that signal like we're safe now, we're okay. Yeah. And if we have that, we have so much. I wouldn't say we have everything, but we have so much.
I love what you're saying to me. What do you feel like is like, what do you think was, I know you just mentioned that as your biggest shift was in your birth itself.
Mhm.
Did that really start to inform this teaching style that you do? Or was there other things?
What informed my teaching style? You know what? I think what was interesting for me in my personal story, I'll share a little bit, without taking up all our time. Birth for me was something I went through with like a sense of like that was pretty easy. Like I actually like after my first birth felt like that was so doable that I think I could do it on my own. And I chose to free birth for my second birth, which also is like a wild decision. I don't think everyone needs to make that decision, but that was mine. And so birth for me was like challenging and a challenge I met pretty gracefully. And I think that was because I had this training. I had been a yoga teacher, I had been a meditation student, I had a lot of tools that I had used in my life to like work through anxiety, work through depression. Like I have a long story. And then after my birth, my story of challenge in my life got much more intense. And I actually went through the experience after my second birth of my daughter, or my second daughter. When she was 6 months old, I started losing all my hair. And I think that that's like people lose their hair after birth. And it's pretty normal, except that mine continued on. And I eventually lost all of my hair to alopecia. And that challenge of dealing with the complete like reorganization of my understanding of who I was through this. It's an autoimmune illness, but it's also just a very affronting challenge to identity.
Yeah.
Um, and my experience handling that and the way that I handled that was a demonstration to me of like the depth of my capacity and my power because I moved through that with a lot of grace and in a lot of ability to hold the grief and to hold the hardship. And that really informed like, oh, people don't not everyone has these pieces in place yet. And I want every birthing person, every mother to come through birth ready to handle all of what life might bring to them because they have had this like rise in who they are and they have faced hardship and invited it in with grace and with strength. And I really think that I was able to handle my hair loss and other challenges that have come in my life with the grace that I had because I had trained essentially for hardship in my earlier life and I had shown myself my power through my birth and I felt ready and I still like my life has continued to offer me like deep challenge and deep grief and I attribute my ability to hold it as something that I've come to through a long journey and I think that more women deserve to be able to hold their lives and their grief and their challenge with grace and beauty and strength. And I think birth is an amazing place and an opportunity to step into that version of yourself, right? Like to walk through the door.
Well, I mean, I can tell you again, all I can go off is my own personal experiences, right? Just like you're sharing yours. And I think, when I had my first two kids, it was before I was in birth work. I could have never imagined why anyone would want to do it without drugs. I could never fathom why anyone would have a home birth I mean, like, I just thought I was so Western medicine, right? And it wasn't until I started doing the work that I got it, and it was just a completely different view. I mean, I, birth work and the birth industry and books that I read, Ina Guide to Childbirth
Mm-hmm.
changed my life. She has a whole chapter on fear
Mm-hmm.
and how it can impact birth. Immediately, and I didn't read that book right away. It was immediately like I could look back at several of the births that I had supported as a doula and realizing like, oh my gosh, it's no wonder their cervix never opened. Right. And you just think, it's just like in any other mammal. when they give birth, right? This, if there is a predator nearby or they don't feel safe, they can literally stop labor
Yeah. And we do too.
and get up and run away.
Yeah.
And then their baby doesn't come out until it's safe. And like, gosh, how many women are in the hospital environment where they just feel completely overwhelmed by the whole situation. They were not prepared. They did not know what to expect. They're getting an IV. They're getting the, like they have all these monitors now now they're like, well, we're not being able to read the monitor that great. So we're going to break your water and we're going to put a monitor on top of the baby's head. And now you've got tubes coming out of your vagina. And by the way, you probably got an epidural. And now you got an epidural, now you got to have a catheter. And then like people just don't understand what that looks like. And it puts them in this state of, I mean, I'm talking about this from the most basic standpoint, really, because then it can get even more complicated than all those things I just mentioned. And if you have no idea that any of those things are possible, the element of nervousness and anxiousness and all of those things. And then we wonder why this diagnosis for failure to progress
Mhm.
happens so often. And we blame it on everything else instead of this idea that maybe you didn't feel safe.
Yeah, totally. Like you said, like we're animals. We're animals, and so that body is like I don't care how much your brain is telling you, like, oh, you're okay. Like I came around around this idea in a postpartum support group actually, because I'm often working with women on the other side of this experience, and safety is not a thought. You cannot think yourself safe. It is a felt sense in the body, and so it doesn't matter how much your brain or the people around you are telling you, like, this is what you need to be safe. If your body is not feeling safe, if your nervous system and your body are like, I'm in stress. Yeah. And so then your body is going to shut down the labor and your brain is not going to convince your body otherwise. You have to be able to have these other ways to convince your body or help your body feel safe. And so one of the things that I'm proud of about the way that I prepare women for birth is that it's actually not focused on any particular way of birthing. I would say it is really helpful if someone is seeking an unmedicated birth, they're already wanting to go that direction, but it is more focused on an empowered birth experience, which is not on results and it is not on circumstances. An
Yes.
empowered birth is about you and how
Yes.
you are moving through the experience, how you are taking a role in decisions, how you're taking a role in like what you want to happen and to change. And that can
And
happen
you want to be
anywhere.
there. Yeah.
Anywhere. I think you can take and work with me and try to find this sense of empowerment, and that sense of empowerment will carry you through the most quote unquote traumatic situation where everything has gone wrong because we cannot control the circumstances of our birth. Emergencies happen. Yeah. And so like what I want anyone to feel like, any woman to feel like, is if their worst case scenario is coming true, they still feel good about what they're doing, how they're responding, and what the experience feels like in the end to them.
Yes.
Right? So it's
Yeah.
really feeling oriented instead of results oriented. I can't guarantee any birth outcomes.
Right.
Definitely not. But I can
Yeah.
be sure that if you have done the preparation to feel empowered in this experience and to feel like strong and graceful, that you will feel better about what happened than you would if you are like not prepared at all and it's really
Totally.
ripped from your hands and you don't know what's going on and you can't keep your grounded sense, you can't keep your centered sense. But
Yeah,
it's totally possible to stay centered in the worst case scenario.
for sure. And I also say to a lot of people, like the people you have in the room matter, right?
Yeah.
If your partner is not supportive, not a supportive person, they probably shouldn't be in there. If your mom, just because your mom or your mother-in-law feels like they have a right to be there, or that they maybe, well, I should have my mother-in-law there because she really wants to be there, but you don't have a great relationship, an intimate, deeply intimate relationship with her, she probably shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
Because if there's somebody in the room who's annoying you or frustrating you or making you feel uncomfortable, or you don't feel like you can be naked in front of
Yeah, if you're
them.
afraid of being judged.
Yeah, a million times they should not be in your room. Like, because they can have a massive subconscious impact.
Totally. I totally agree. And there's a really interesting part with like moms specifically where you have to know your mom and if they can handle this, you know? And if there is a part of these, like, I don't think my mom can handle not making this about her. That's something I hear about a lot. Like
Yeah.
if your mom or mother-in-law cannot do their own work to let you be the center of this room and let your needs matter more than their opinions, more than their births, more than their like feelings about how things should go or what should happen, then like that's not the right person to have in the room. But that's a hard call to make. It is hard to say like I don't trust my mom with this experience because it requires and asks you to be brutally honest with yourself around who your mother really is and what level of emotional intelligence they are capable of. And that is, we can love someone as they are and still know like they're not ready for this. I think a really good example that I would share is like my mom has traumatic birth stories. And I put them in air quotes because I think they fall into these categories of things where told are emergencies and trauma, and then there are emergencies, and then they're actually like if we really look at birth and understand birth, we're like I actually think I probably would have been fine. Mine was like I had a cord wrapped around my neck and like the was rescued by the OB, right? And she tells this story, and so it's very like man, like I have compassion, like very traumatic story. And then when I learned more about birth, I was like, I'm not sure he saved my life, right? Like,
Right.
but like,
Yeah. When you
but what I
learn more,
did know,
you review. I talk about this about my first birth. My first birth seemed very dramatic to me. And my doctor sat on the edge of my bed after I gave birth by cesarean and said, "You're so lucky you were here. Because back in the day, you would have been one of those women who died in childbirth." My God, I loved that story. I
yeah,
loved that story. I got to tell it. It was so dramatic. I got to be like, I almost died.
hmm
I had to have a cesarean. And then, of course, I went through my doula training and had no clue that I was just like so many other people and that it wasn't actually an emergency. My baby was not truly in distress. It was the Pitocin that was causing the problem. Like
yeah,
then you get the real story once you get into birth, and then you're just like, holy crap. I told so many people that story.
yeah,
Like I was that person. And I always think like, how many people that I hear all the time that say, "Oh, I had an emergency C-section and it was, crazy and blah, blah, blah." And it's like, okay,
yeah.
it likely wasn't. I mean, I want to
Maybe they do happen,
maybe,
but yeah,
but likely not,
yeah, like
right? It's called an emergency C-section when it's not planned.
right,
Not that if everybody's just like, yeah, we're going to go get the OR prep. We're getting, like a true emergency. My very first birth as a doula was a cord prolapse.
hmm
Very first birth. That was an emergency.
hmm
And I have been doing this for 20 years.
hmm
That is the only emergency surgery, emergency cesarean that I've ever experienced in over
yeah,
300 births.
yeah,
It was the only one. Everyone else was just like, things aren't going right. Baby's starting to show signs of distress, and then we just moved to cesarean. But there's a very different from emergency. But we're getting off the topic
yeah.
of
No, I think that there's two things. I want to finish this little bit about my mom because it's like stuck on. So, but the my mom did experience that, like that level of like you were rescued, and so I had to make the decision leading up to my birth that I'm close to my mom, very close to my mom, and I just didn't think she could handle the kind of birth experience I was seeking without letting her story influence what was happening and not being able to hold her own emotional experience like I would need her to. And I think my mom is amazing and she is emotionally intelligent and she grows all the time. But I just had to say, like, I'm not going to include her in that birth experience. I don't think she's ready to be who I need in the room. Um, and just honoring that. And then the next piece that you're bringing up, though, I think I have like a hand on my heart because it's this, the idea that you had to be rescued. I think one of the reasons I do this work and that I keep getting called back to this work is I think that storyline and what I will in this moment deem the medical patriarchy is holds women back. I think it holds our society back. It keeps women small. It keeps them in the role that they needed to be rescued. I think that long before I ever gave birth, I read an article where a whole bunch of male OBs explained why they got into the job, because I was like, why would anyone want to be a male OBGYN? That seems weird to me. And I read all these lists, and so many of them described the experience of a cesarean and how powerful they felt. Multiple. And I was like, ick in my body. Ick. Because that's the power that's meant for that birthing woman to experience and to gain. And they were taking it and feeling like how powerful I was bringing life into earth. And I was like, whoa, like that was hers.
Right. That
That
wasn't
was
yours.
hers. And so I think all these non-emergent emergency cesareans are a part of this huge system. And I don't want to say that there's like an overlord controlling it. I don't think it's like that at all, right? Like this is nobody's like designing it on purpose. But where
Purpose.
we are now, it is robbing women of that sense of power, of that sense of I did this. I did this hard thing. I created this. I brought my baby here, and instead we're taking that from them through these non-necessary cesareans, or through convincing someone they need pitocin when they just needed more time. And all the ways that I'm sure you've talked about on many of your podcasts. And I think that hurts our world. I think our world needs strong women who know how powerful they are, who are ready to lead and to mother in a way that creates progress, growth, healing, safety. I think that it's time, now more than ever. We look at the turmoil in the world, and there's always turmoil in the world. Like I don't want to pretend that it hasn't, it's not new, right? But we are in a really challenging time right now. We're seeing a lot of, like, if you watch the news for 5 minutes, you're like, oh my God, what do we do? And I think women who are ready to lead, birthing people who are ready to lead, in their local areas, on bigger worlds, in just their families, to just raise children who care about each other, who feel strong about themselves. That matters no more than ever.
Well, and I think too, like of course, again, I can't help but visit my own feelings about all this because I've had a lot of them, and I've had some pretty challenging birth experiences. And like part of what you're saying really resonates with me, because when I had my first birth, I wouldn't have known that I lost some power in that. Wouldn't have known that because I was just living it as it was happening. Like it just happened. But what I tried to do was get my power back, though. I can look back at this story now,
Mhm.
or look at the flow of things and understand what happened. But in the moment, I just kept telling the story in order to get my power back. Like, oh,
Mhm.
I had to do that. It had to be done so that I didn't feel like a failure of some sort. Do you understand? Like there was some psychology in loving the drama of it. But
Mhm.
also, I didn't really get it until after I had a vaginal birth after 3 cesareans. My last baby was born at home, and it was excruciating. It was awful. I wound up having to have reconstructive surgery because he was big and it caused a lot of damage. I pushed too hard, too fast. Like, there was all these things. And most people would say, oh my gosh, then you must have rather had the cesarean over vaginal birth. No effing way.
Mhm.
No way. Because I stepped into a new version of myself that I don't think was possible in any other way. And this is not to discount women who choose something different, and there's a lot of people who might feel offended by me saying that, but this is my experience. I'd like to say that, but also you literally cannot know it until you live it. So I'm not saying that anyone is less than or that I was less than even. I just didn't know the difference. And there was a massive difference.
Yeah.
That being said, it was also one of the hardest things I ever did in my life. But I came out on the other side of it better, in my opinion. And my baby was certainly better. He's the healthiest kid of all my kids.
Yeah.
you
I
know?
will add in that.
And, but anyways, I mean, there was so many things that happened, but what's frustrating too, though, is that all of my other births were impacted by that first birth. I had major challenges with my second. I attempted a VBAC, wouldn't happen. I attempted a home birth VBAC with my third, had to be transferred in for another C-section. And it was all because of the scar tissue that was from the previous cesareans. And when that all got cleaned up and cleared out, I wound up having my biggest baby yet, because they always told me it was because I had a big baby. My babies were too big. Then I went off to have the biggest baby ever, of all my children, vaginally at home with no issues. But it was because they cleaned up and fixed all the crap that had happened to me because of the first one,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like,
Yeah. And we're
these
all
are the
gonna
things we don't know, what we don't know.
we don't
And
know
there's
we don't know. And we're all gonna have our own journey to it. Like there is this saying that you get the birth you need, right? And that can sound really harsh to someone who experienced trauma, because it's like, how dare you say that this is what I needed? And I don't think, I don't want to imply that that is what it means. I don't think that anybody should or is due needs to experience trauma and these horrific things that happen and they go through. But the growth that you get in those experiences, you still will learn how strong you are and how powerful you are. You'll have to do it in a different way. You'll have to do
yes,
it in this other journey. And you spoke
yes,
to your journey and how really like that third or fourth, your final birth, your last birth was only possible because of the journey you had been on, and you
for
couldn't
sure.
have come to it any other way. And so you did gain the knowledge and the strength and then the sense of capacity, like seeing how big we are, how much we can hold. You did learn it through your other experiences, not in an ideal, beautiful
In an
fashion,
ideal
in an
fashion, right?
ugly, mucky fashion, right? Not one that we would call in for ourselves, but you still grew and you got to this place that you needed to be at through your journey, messy as it was. Yeah, and so I think one of the reasons I like working with people, I think it's like this almost sweet spot of like they're curious. They believe there's maybe something to this unmedicated birth or this home birth. They're not sure. And so my hope is that we can go on the journey towards strength that birth invites us into, right? Like they're like, oh, I can learn how strong I am in this experience of meeting challenge instead of having to learn on the back end
Yeah,
where I'm like, oh shoot, now I need to learn how to hold myself in this grief, and
right.
in this challenge. And it is true, you will get the birth you need, whether you like it or not. And we can't
Yeah.
necessarily say how that unfolds. Yeah. And every birth is different, and we can't say what will happen. But this is why I'm like being on the prep end, right? Because I like and I think it's important to have these tools in our toolbox so that the birth that arises for us, the birth that we are met with and that we find ourselves in, we can navigate it with the same tools regardless. If you have no tools, and like you said in the beginning, you're showing up at birth completely toolbox empty. You're like, I don't even know what job we're doing. I didn't bring a hammer. um, then you're gonna get the birth you're gonna get, and you're gonna find your tools in a different way. But I'm hoping and hopeful that the more women and birthing people are going in with a toolbox. Like here's 15, 20 tools. You
Yeah.
can use them. They're gonna help you when stuff comes. When the nurse is knocking you up in the middle of the night to tell you you need more pitocin, you have the tool of like self belief to say like, no, thank you. I actually am enjoying rest. Like just all the tools
Yeah.
on the front end. That's my goal. That's my goal.
Well, and that goes back to our original question of why we think that true birth prep and solid birth prep course or online or in person or virtual, like why it's so critically important. Because here's the other thing I want to just get across crystal clear
Hmm.
is that most pregnant women don't even know what to Google. They don't even know the questions to ask. And that's why having some sort of class that guides you or a guide, a doula, a birthify, we do it all online and have that sort of stuff to fill your toolbox.
Hmm.
Fill your toolbox for birth and postpartum before you're in crisis, before you're there and you're just like, deer in the headlights,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Does that work for some people? Absolutely.
Sure.
Right? It does work for some
Yeah.
people,
Totally.
but it doesn't work for a lot of people, you know? So,
I think one universal, though, that as we're talking about that is like, what do I know that people, even if you're not prepared or don't understand what birth is going to look like, I think universally people would like to feel good about how it went,
yeah.
right? Like we talk about, oh, I want the healthy baby, but you also don't, most people, I would guess 100% of people hope that they come through their birth, whether they know a lot or they know a little, feeling like, I feel really good about how that went. That was the best it could have gone for me in that, what I was handed.
Right.
And what I think is important about prep, even if all you're preparing for is like the mental side, and I think you should prepare for all of it, but like let's say you're just going to prepare for that like mental piece of like what am I going to think about it, how am I going to feel? With the right tools, the circumstances don't matter. You can still feel good. Like you could have a cord prolapse and needed a true emergency cesarean and be like, I got handed like a shitty hand. I couldn't have done anything different. And I really feel proud of how I navigated that. And I endured like a challenging medical emergency and I did it to the best of my ability with the most
Yep.
grace and peace I could.
Yep. It's a shift in the thinking, right? It's a shift in the thinking that's so major.
Totally.
Well, gosh, this has been fun and an hour has flown by
Yeah.
very
Totally.
quickly. It's probably one of those things we could like talk about all day.
And we do.
I
That's why
know,
we
right?
do
We
it.
both
That's why
do.
we do it.
So as we do all day long. Well, I just want to thank you, Jenna, for joining us and just sharing that information and everything. We ask everybody at the end of every episode, speaking of the village, besides what you do, what do you think is the next most important piece for people to have in their village as far as support goes?
I think there's two things I want to say. And the one is if you're coming from preparing for postpartum, I want to talk about like nutrition, like having nutrient dense food ready for you, understanding the kind of nourishment you will need to heal your body and to potentially feed a baby, and what other choices you're making. So pay attention, look into if you can hire somebody to cook or help you, but also just like recipes and ways of like thinking about it so that you have the food and the nourishment piece starting like in your mind before the day of.
I'm going to do a little plug here for Mama Meals.
Sure.
Mama Meals is incredible. They're here in Southern California, but they ship all over the United States and they do all of their meal prep specifically for postpartum diets.
Yeah.
And they use all organic, farm to table, the whole 9 yards. So, but anyways, so we'll put that in the show notes.
And the other thing I would add, and this is hard, but it's like it's other moms, like the village is the community. And so seeking actively what is community going to look like for you, it might not be the same people that were with you before. It might be new people. It might mean turning to a support group, turning to an online group if you're not in a place that has a local group, but a local group is ideal. But it is like that community. We know beyond a shadow of a doubt, there is research to show that having peer support, having actual other people in the trenches that you can go through and talk to about this will change your mental health experience
Yes.
on the flip side. So
A million times.
know what your resources are and look for the people around you, and find those groups and find those connections.
Brilliant. Brilliant answer. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank
We
you.
thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you for listening. I hope you got some value out of this episode. And don't forget to check in next week, where we'll be keeping on talking about speaking of the village. Have a great afternoon, and we look forward to hearing from you again soon.